day they fired me, I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't even ask why. I just stood there holding a cardboard box while everyone watched. 5 minutes earlier, I still had a job. 5 minutes later, I was nothing. No badge, no desk, no future. And the worst part was the smiles on their faces, like this was entertainment. Like my life collapsing was just another office story they would forget by lunch. I worked at Harrington & Co., a glass and steel tech company in downtown Chicago that looked successful from the outside, but ran on fear inside. I was never the loud one. I wasn't the guy cracking jokes in meetings or taking long coffee breaks. I was the quiet one who stayed late, fixed problems no one wanted to deal with, and covered for coworkers when deadlines were missed. I did the work others avoided. But I was also the guy who wore the same jacket every winter, who skipped lunch, who said no problem, even when it was a problem. They knew I was broke, and somehow that made me invisible. My manager, Greg Miller, loved to call himself self-made. What he really meant was that he stepped on people to climb higher. New car every year, loud laugh, bigger ego. He barely noticed me most days, but when he did, it was always a reminder of where I stood. He'd glance at my shoes and ask if everything was okay at home. It sounded like concern, but it wasn't. It was power. It was him reminding me that he knew I needed this job more than he needed me. I lived in a one-room apartment above a closed laundromat. The elevator hadn't worked in years. The heat came on when it felt like it. Every month, I paid rent late. Every night, I sat on the edge of my bed with my laptop open and the lights off, choosing which bill could wait, electricity or phone, food or gas. Some nights, crackers and water. Some nights, nothing. But every morning, I showed up because I believed something simple and stupid. I believed hard work mattered. 3 weeks before they fired me, I noticed something off in a financial report. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I checked again and again. It wasn't a mistake. Money was being moved in small amounts, hidden carefully, but illegal. I didn't go around telling people. I didn't try to act like a hero. I took it straight to Greg, quietly, respectfully. I told him I thought there was an error in the accounts. He looked at the screen, then at me, then smiled and said he'd handle it. That smile changed everything. From that moment, the air around me felt different. Meetings I was always invited to disappeared from my calendar. People stopped talking when I walked into a room. Access to files I needed was suddenly gone. Then, on a Friday morning, HR emailed me for a quick meeting. No subject line, no explanation. I already knew. The HR room was cold. Greg sat there with Linda from HR. Linda didn't look at me once. Greg leaned back like he was enjoying the moment and told me they were restructuring. One word to erase years. My role was no longer needed. He slid a paper across the table and told me to sign. I didn't read it. I didn't see the point. When I stood up, Greg laughed, just a little, enough to hurt. He told me maybe I should try something more my speed. Linda finally looked at me, but she said nothing. I packed my desk while people pretended not to stare. I heard whispers behind me. Someone said I messed up the reports. Someone else said it figured. I carried my box outside in the rain. A plant, an old notebook, a photo of my mother. That was my career, reduced to a box. I stood outside for a long time as cars passed and people rushed by. I checked my phone. $214.38. Rent was due in 4 days. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh, I might break. That night, I sat alone in the dark of my apartment, replaying every late night, every favor, every moment I stayed quiet. And that's when I understood the truth. They didn't fire me because I was bad at my job. They fired me because I knew too much, and they thought I was too weak to do anything about it. They were wrong. I didn't know it yet, but sitting there, broke and forgotten, Something inside me changed. Not my hope, my fear. And when fear disappears, everything changes. After I lost my job, I thought the worst part would be the money. I was wrong. The money was just the surface. The real pain came from realizing how alone I actually was. The people I had helped for years disappeared overnight. Messages I sent went unanswered. Calls went straight to voicemail. It was like I had never existed in their lives at all. On Monday morning, out of habit, I woke up at 6. For a few seconds, I forgot I had been fired. Then it hit me again, heavy and cold. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the pipes knock in the walls, wondering how long I could survive like this. I made coffee with the last of the grounds and opened my laptop, not to look for jobs, but to understand what had really happened to me. That's when I saw it, an email from Greg, sent company-wide, thanking the team for catching a serious accounting mistake before it caused damage. My name wasn't there. Instead, the mistake was blamed on a former employee who failed to follow procedure. That former employee was me. My hands shook as I read it. He had turned my warning into my crime. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march back into that building and demand the truth, but I didn't. I closed the laptop and sat there in silence because I knew something important. If I reacted emotionally, I would lose. Greg wanted me angry. He wanted me despot. He wanted me gone and quiet. Then came the second betrayal, a call from my sister. She asked me if I was okay and then carefully asked if it was true that I had been fired for misconduct. She had heard it from a cousin who heard it from someone who worked with Greg's wife. That's how fast lies travel when the truth is inconvenient. I told her the truth, but I could hear the doubt in her silence. That hurt more than the lie itself. By the end of that week, my landlord left a note on my door. Rent was overdue. No extensions this time. I sold my old watch, the one my father gave me, just to buy groceries. Each time I handed something over the counter, it felt like I was giving away a piece of myself. Still, I kept my head down. I didn't complain. I didn't beg. One night, as I lay in bed staring at the dark, my phone buzzed. It was a message from a coworker I thought I could trust. He said he was sorry about what happened, but then he added something that changed everything. He said Greg had been nervous lately, that the company was being quietly audited, that my report hadn't disappeared. It had been locked away. I stared at that message for a long time. My heart raced, but I stayed calm. This wasn't hope. This was information, and information is power. I realized then that Greg hadn't fired me because the problem was solved. He fired me because the problem was still there. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to chase justice loudly. I wasn't going to expose anyone on social media or beg for sympathy. I was going to disappear. I would let them believe their story had worked. Let them think I was broken. Let them sleep peacefully. Because while they were celebrating my fall, I was learning something far more valuable. Betrayal doesn't end you. It reveals everyone. And once you see people clearly, you can plan your next move without emotion. I had lost my job, my money, and my reputation, but I hadn't lost the truth, and I hadn't lost my patience. For a long time after that, nothing changed on the outside. I was still broke, still unemployed, still waking up every morning with the same heavy silence. But inside, something had shifted. I stopped thinking like someone who was begging for a second chance. I started thinking like someone who was preparing for a long game. I took a job most people wouldn't even look at, night shifts at a small warehouse on the edge of the city. The pay was low, the hours were brutal, but it was honest, and more importantly, it gave me time. During breaks, while others scrolled on their phones, I read. I studied financial laws, company structures, audits, acquisitions. I wasn't chasing motivation, I was building understanding. During the day, I slept. In the evenings, I learned. I downloaded old public records, case studies, business failures, and turnarounds. I learned how companies really fall apart, not in movies, but in real life, slowly, quietly, from the inside, the same way Greg had tried to erase me. I started freelancing online. Small tasks at first, data cleaning, financial reviews, things no one else wanted to do. I charged less than everyone else, not because I was desperate, but because I was buying trust. One client turned into two. Two turned into five. Within a year, I was making more than I ever did at Harrington & Co., but I didn't change my life. I stayed in the same apartment. I wore the same clothes. I stayed invisible. Every dollar I earned, I tracked. I saved aggressively. I invested carefully. No risks, no shortcuts, just patience. I knew this wasn't about getting rich fast. This was about control, about leverage, about timing. Sometimes I'd check Harrington & Co.'s public filings, just a glance, nothing more. The company was growing on paper, but the cracks were there. High employee turnover, rising legal costs, subtle changes in leadership. Greg was still there, still smiling in photos, still pretending everything was perfect. 3 years passed like that, quietly. I upgraded my skills, I earned certifications, I built relationships, not friendships, but professional respect. People started coming to me for advice. They didn't know my story, they didn't need to. They only knew that when I spoke, I was right. By the 4th year, I formed a small consulting firm. Nothing flashy, just my name on a simple website. Companies hired us to find problems before they became disasters. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now being paid to do the exact thing that got me fired. Then, one evening, while reviewing a new client's data, I saw a familiar pattern. The same one I had seen years ago. It led back to Harrington & Co., the same hidden movements, the same quiet manipulation. Only now, I understood the full picture. This wasn't just Greg. This was systemic. I closed my laptop and leaned back, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Calm certainty. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was ready. They still thought I was gone, still thought I was broke, still thought their secret was buried. They had no idea I was standing closer than ever, watching patiently, waiting for the right moment. Once I saw the full pattern, I stopped thinking like a survivor and started thinking like an owner. Revenge wasn't about embarrassment or public drama anymore. It was about positioning, about letting people defeat themselves while I stayed invisible. Harrington & Co. was weaker than it looked. The numbers told that story clearly. Growth was slowing. Investors were nervous. Leadership was divided. Greg was still in charge of his department, but his confidence had cracks now. Lawsuits were quietly draining money. Employees were leaving faster than they were being replaced. The company didn't need an enemy. It was already collapsing from the inside. I didn't move fast. I moved carefully. I started by building relationships with people who mattered, people who had no idea who I really was, investors, consultants, legal advisors. I never mentioned my past. I spoke only in facts, calm, clear, undeniable facts. I positioned myself as someone who understood risk better than most. At the same time, I set up a holding company. Simple structure, clean money, nothing aggressive, just quiet readiness. I knew that when Harrington & Co. finally stumbled, it wouldn't be dramatic, it would be subtle. A missed quarter, a leadership change, a sudden need for capital. That moment came sooner than I expected. A major client pulled out. Stock dropped. Panic followed. The board began looking for outside help. That's when my name appeared on a list of potential partners, not as an employee, not as a whistleblower, as an investor. Negotiations were slow, serious, boring to anyone watching from the outside, but every conversation moved me closer.
I reviewed documents they didn't want me to notice. I asked questions that made lawyers uncomfortable. I never accused, I only listened. Greg was still there. I saw his name on internal charts, still powerful, still unaware. I imagined his face when he would finally understand what was happening. Not anger, confusion. That was better. By the time the deal reached its final stage, my holding company controlled enough influence to make decisions, not loudly, not publicly, quietly, one signature at a time. I didn't rush the final step. I waited until everything was locked, legal, irreversible. The night before the acquisition was finalized, I slept better than I had in years, not because I was winning, but because I knew the ending was already written. All that was left was for them to read it. The next morning, Harrington & Co. was no longer the company that fired me. It was a company that belonged to me.
The room was full when I walked in. Board members, senior managers, lawyers in dark suits, all sitting straight, all pretending they were calm. This was supposed to be a routine meeting, a formal announcement, just another change at the top. No one expected a surprise. I took my seat at the head of the table and waited while the legal details were read aloud. Percentages, shares, control. Every word landed quietly, but each one carried weight. When it was over, the chairman cleared his throat and announced the new ownership structure. That was when people finally looked at me properly, not as a guest, not as an advisor, but as the owner. Greg was sitting halfway down the table. At first, he didn't react. Then I saw it, the slow recognition. His smile froze, his eyes narrowed. He leaned forward slightly, reading the name again, as if it might change if he stared long enough. It didn't. When our eyes met, I didn't smile. I didn't need to. He already understood. After the meeting, I asked HR to schedule individual reviews. Greg's was first. He walked into my office like someone stepping onto thin ice. He tried to speak casually, asked how long I had been involved. I let him talk. People reveal more when they're nervous. When he finally stopped, I reminded him of a meeting from years ago. A cold room, a piece of paper pushed across a table, a laugh that wasn't loud, but sharp enough to cut. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply told him that his role was no longer needed. The words felt familiar. He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. There was nothing he could say that would change anything. I didn't fire him publicly. I didn't humiliate him. I let the process handle it cleanly. His access was removed, his office reassigned. By the end of the day, he was gone, carrying his own box past people who pretended not to stare. Standing alone in that office later, I didn't feel triumph. I felt quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when a long storm finally ends. Revenge had promised satisfaction, but what it gave me was closure. I made changes after that, real ones, transparent systems, fair audits. People were rewarded for honesty, not silence. The company slowly healed. Profits returned. Trust followed. Sometimes I think back to the man standing in the rain with $200 in his account, holding a cardboard box. He thought his life was over. He thought he had lost everything. But losing that job didn't destroy me. It revealed me. Here's what I learned. Being broke isn't the end. Being betrayed isn't the end. Staying quiet doesn't mean staying weak. Sometimes the most powerful move is patience. Let people underestimate you. Let them laugh, because when the time comes, you won't need to say anything at all.